If you're looking for great quality in a watercolor pencil and you're unsure about what brand will best fit your needs, I think this video will give you great pointers. When I made my expensive Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle watercolor pencils review video recently, I found them so similar to the high-quality Faber-Castell Arbor Dur that many of you guys asked for a comparison. So you're going to see them used side by side in one single painting for more insight on possible differences. And I can tell you I was not expecting what I found out, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts about that. At the time I'm filming this, I found a 120 pencil set of the Faber-Castell Arbor Dur, which is quite a bit of choice in colors versus an 80 pencil set coming soon with Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle watercolor pencils. I myself own a 12 pencil set of the Caran d'Ache and a 60 pencil set of the Faber-Castell. For context, I've been using the Arbor Dur for a while and noticing how nice they behave compared to 8 other brands I own. And recently I've tried the Museum Aquarelle and my impression was that they're the closest thing that I've seen to the Faber-Castell Arbor Dur. Both brands can be found online pretty easily, even though in my experience and where I'm from, I find it's easier to find Faber-Castell at local art stores. And if you need that info, I've linked both sets in the description of this video. Price-wise, Faber-Castell is more affordable with an average of about $1.52 for a pencil, while for the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle right now, we're looking at something around $2.83 per pencil. With both brands, it's possible to purchase a pencil separately from a set, so keep in mind that this can vary a lot depending on the color, the set you're buying, and where you're doing it. But overall, you can see a pattern of Caran d'Ache being noticeably pricier. Now let's take a look at how qualitative these watercolor pencils are. I love how both boxes look and feel sturdy. Thick padded cardboard for Caran d'Ache and a metal tin for Faber-Castell. The Caran d'Ache website is very clear about the pigment in their watercolor pencils being extra thin quality, while with Faber-Castell, I find it's a bit less specific. We only learned the pencils are premium quality and highly pigmented. As to where they come from, the Arbor Dur are made in Germany, while the Museum Aquarelle are manufactured in Switzerland. The Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle seem to offer a majority of watercolor pencils with a very good to excellent light fastness, which means it's unlikely that the colors would fade easily over time or in direct sunlight. And I noticed that from my 12 color pencil set, but I'll admit I haven't checked all 80 colors, but you will find an indication of that by just searching for your desired pencil and looking at the star rating on it. Well, with Faber-Castell, we know, according to the website, the light fastness is excellent, but there's no clear indication of it on the pencils. If you want to create art to sell or exhibit with these brands and you want to make sure that you're getting the best light fastness possible, I wouldn't rely on any video or any random chart that you find online. Instead, I would go directly to the brand and ask them for that info. Now let's take a closer look at the watercolor pencils themselves. Both wood casings look very similar with an hexagonal shape and they're easy to grip. Both lead types are said to be strong, so I tested that by sharpening the pencils to the max and I got a pretty good result on both, as you can see. And when pressing really hard, nothing breaks, when normally I would expect highly sharpened tips to break in most pencils, so that's definitely a huge plus. I like to start with a quick blending test to get a feel for the watercolor pencil. The Faber-Castell Arbor Dur pencil feels pretty creamy and easy to color with. And in comparison, I'm surprised to see the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle feels a bit dry but still fairly easy to color with. This could be an indicator of the Museum Aquarelle to be better for fine details like hair, eyelashes, stuff like that. And personally, I prefer the creaminess of the Arbor Dur. When I blend them, you can see the colors look rich and I'm able to get most of the pencil lines out. I think they're looking pretty similar and I'm glad because with watercolor pencils, my biggest pet peeve is those streaks that you can see after blending. I picked a photo that will allow me to use various techniques and effects, smooth washes and crisp details all in one piece of art. To make sure colors match okay, I start from the smallest set, the Museum Aquarelle, and I try to find a match in the largest set, the Arbor. Yellows look good, pinks and blues too. I find the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle look more vibrant when I blend them, almost like the water-soluble pencils Derwent Inktense. With all I'm noticing right now already, I can tell you I'm not regretting making this comparison video. The Caran d'Ache red is more of an orange red, while I only seem to have pinkish reds in my Faber-Castell set, but we'll make do. I like a white pencil for highlights, and the only one I have is from Faber-Castell, so I will use that. And also the white luminance colored pencil from Caran d'Ache, and I might also use a white gel pen and a white watercolor stick. I also need black for the stronger shadows, and we're all set. The best for me is to start with the background, and when I can, I try to get the whole sheet in one go. I used to mask a few things here and there before, but now I tend to dive in. Faber-Castell Arbor will be used on the left side and the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle on the right side. I want this to look pretty smooth and like traditional watercolors, so the trick is to make swatches on a separate piece of paper and to activate the paint there and then paint. The sheet needs to be wet for colors to flow and look smooth after they dry. So far it's going pretty good. I still find the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle look a bit more vibrant, so I'm having to add more water to keep the colors lighter. The colors look very similar. They spread out in the same way, and I'm really not noticing any difference than the vibrancy so far. I love to add a second layer to my backgrounds after the first is dry to intensify colors and make everything look exactly as I want it. And a second layer looks great. To me, using these watercolor pencils in this way resembles watercolors a whole lot, and I'm really not seeing a difference. It's one of the things that I feel people miss about watercolor pencils, is that they're so versatile. Since I'm going to work on smaller areas now, I think it'd be a good idea to use these watercolor pencils as most people would think of using them, which is to color directly on paper. The hardest part for me is to make sure not to mix up the pencils or the sides I'm using them on, but so far I'm doing pretty good. The vibrancy again on the Caran d'Ache side is noticeable. There are some minor visible lines on each side, really similar. And both types lit really well, so I really don't have much to say here. I'm happy because both sides match almost perfectly for now. I've done comparisons like this before, and there's always a difference, but not here. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. I'm going to start adding some detail, and we'll get a good idea of how various watercolor pencil techniques work here. At this point, it's important to have shadows in the painting, so I'm adding black, but I know to be careful and not overdo it. That's why I also add blue as a way to darken some of these yellowish areas, so it looks more like a piece of rocky land. This second layer on these areas does it because now they're looking pretty defined, and the contrast is good. I'm happy with how vibrant both sides are looking. I've had experiences before with other watercolor pencils where you need to layer and layer again to get the colors to really show, but it's really not the case here. I want to spice things up with some texture now, and it's going to be our chance to see how the leads behave on paper when they're wet. I love how sharp colors are looking with Faber-Castell. With this technique, the pigment comes really easily, it's nice. I'm surprised because with Caran d'Ache, I'm not getting as much pigment, but more of a watery patch of pigment if I'm not careful. It's more difficult to control. It's like pigment doesn't dissolve as well, and remember in the beginning I noticed these watercolor pencils felt a bit more dry, so that must be why. I still managed to get it to look decent, it's just not as easy as it is with the Arbor. I want this painting to look really nice, so I'm going to cheat and mix and match both brands now for the highlights, because my end goal is always to have fun and create a piece of art I'm proud of, whether I experiment or not, and whether it's for YouTube or just for myself. Those are minor touches really. There's so little to highlight to begin with, since most of the painting is sky and water. Let's splatter a little bit of the white Faber-Castell Arbor Stir watercolor pencil. And now I think my white gel pen will take care of the rest. Like I said, I do it for fun, so I suggest to finish the highlights with extra thin white watercolor or a gouache if you're looking for something of the highest quality from start to finish. I leave it to you to let me know in the comments if you can see a difference between both sides and what your general thoughts are. My preference goes to the Arbor Stir. I hope this helped. You can watch this whole playlist of watercolor and water-soluble pencil videos next. Thanks for watching and see you next time.